Our scripture lesson comes to us from Matthew chapter 12. While Jesus was still speaking to the crowds, his mother and his brothers were standing outside wanting to speak to him. Someone told him, "Look, your mother and your brothers are standing outside, wishing to speak to you." But to the one who told him this, Jesus replied, "Who is my mother, and who are my brothers?" And pointing to his disciples, he said, "Here are my mother and my brothers. For whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother, my sister, and my mother." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. One of the things I've done, all of their employees can tell you what the company values at a moment's notice. A few examples. Patagonia, maker of outdoor clothing, has 4 core values as a company. Build the best product, cause no unnecessary harm, use business to protect nature, and don't be bound by convention. Easy enough. Zappos, the shoe seller, has corporate values. Can you believe this? Theirs sound a little odd for a shoe company. Listen to this. Zappos values delivering wow through service. They embrace and drive change. They create fun and a little weirdness. They're adventurous, creative, open-minded, and they pursue growth and learning. They're passionate and determined, and they're humble. These are their core values. Every employee of that company could tell you the core values right off the bat. But the best goes to, if you can even believe it, Build-A-Bear Workshop. Their core values are reach, learn, diversity, collaborate, give, and celebrate. Come on, that's good. If you're going to be a teddy bear company, those are some solid values. We've been working around here. I've been excited for this sermon series for a while about what this particular church, Laboratory Presbyterian Church, values. What are our values? What things do we want to live into in this next season of ministry? And we've worked together with some teams over the last couple of months to come up with, are you ready to hear the values of our church? I hope you like them, otherwise don't run out right away. We belong to the family of Christ. Everyone belongs here. We will invest in the youth of our church. We will live into our namesake as a laboratory of faith. Ooh, I like that one. We're a community of faith who lives life together. And we will focus outside the walls of our building as a missional church. Those are the values that we've set forward for this next season of our ministry. And so today we're going to start with our very first value and explore each of these in turn for the next couple weeks. And the first is this: we belong to the family of Christ. We belong to the family of Christ. And obviously we'd want to start with a biblical understanding of what a family looks like. And actually, it's a little more complicated than you might think. It looks like some of what we recognize today, and some parts not so much. Essentially, in the Bible, there are these expanding circles of family. The first circle, the smallest, is the nuclear family. Very much similar to the way it is for us today. Mom, dad, kids, everybody who lives under one roof. Once the kids are old enough to strike out on their own, which, by the way, back in biblical times was around 12 or 14. Some of you need to get to work. They'd get married and start their own family and leave the house, and then that becomes a new nuclear family. But in a nomadic and agricultural system like the ancient Israelites had, this was also known as your labor force, right? Anyone who complains in here about the chores you had to do growing up, mom and dad ran a business. They had to keep their family afloat through what they did. And they did that by asking the kids to pitch in and do the work, plow the fields, repair the tools, mend the fabrics, things like that, to keep the family going. And in fact, sadly, most of the kids were thought more of as a business asset than they were thought of as members of the family. Ever notice in the New Testament that it's Jesus who's telling everyone to pay attention to what kids have to say? It's because no one does. To them, they have just as much interest in listening to their kids' opinions as they do listening to their tractor. Other than the business nature of this, we get this family circle, right? We know nuclear families. The circle out from that is the extended family. Aunts, uncles, grandparents, anyone who shared your name or your bloodline. This circle made sure that they looked after each other no matter what. When we read earlier in Genesis that God had called Abram, who will eventually become Abraham, and let's just admit that that's confusing. But this is Father Abraham, who had many sons. Many sons had Father. Okay. Abram is called to leave everything he knows, to leave out on some great unknown adventure. And what's the first thing he does? He gets together his wife Sarai, who will be called Sarah, and his brother's son Lot, and the whole extended family. He calls together a family reunion to go on a camping trip. If that's not scary for you, I don't know what is. But he calls them all together because the extended family had each other's back. They were a support structure. If one nuclear family's farm had a bad crop one year, the extended family would hop in and help out. If one member of the nuclear family got hurt, the extended family would jump together to provide more hands to do the work. If the matriarch and patriarch of the family were too old to take care of themselves, they would move in with the extended family to be looked after. It was a support structure. And again, maybe this isn't too different from how we understand our families today. But the next two circles out look a little different for us. Right outside of extended family is this idea of a clan or a tribe. When I was in high school, the first musical I ever played the drums for was Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. Anyone fans of this one? Great music. Total blast. And it might not be the most biblically accurate thing out there. It reminds us of how the nation of Israel got its start. Jacob has 12 sons. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. Yes, I practiced in my office this week. The Bible tells us that each of these sons is the beginning of a tribe of Israel. As these families grow and the extended families get bigger and bigger and bigger, they can't keep track of everybody anymore. It becomes these big, huge tribes. And what's wild about it is if you read the story of Joseph and his 11 brothers, the personalities of the brothers are very much the personalities of the tribes of Israel. The tribes eventually become something like our concept of states. In the beginning of the nation of Israel, they don't have a centralized government with a king. Each tribe had their own judge to serve as leader. They worked together on things, but ultimate authority rested with each tribe in their judges. They made their own decision. So imagine for a moment this weird family dynamic. Instead of West Virginia, we just had the Friar tribe, where like everyone was sort of kind of related. And we still had to sort out things like taxes and government and roads and bridges and all that stuff, but it was all family fight. Can you imagine the Thanksgiving dinners under this scenario? Crazy. And then what's revolutionary for the Old Testament is the circle out from that is the nation of Israel. Nuclear family, extended family, tribes, nation. God very clearly calls Abram to start a new nation, essentially a whole country of people with some rather interesting dynamics and characteristics. There's some kind of land that God is going to give this country, some sort of promised land, so they'll be settled in a place. But even that place doesn't seem to be the most important descriptor as what God tells Abram in this first story, that they will be blessed by God and that they're to use that blessing to be a blessing for others. Rather than ensure that their economy was strong or that they had a great national defense or that their GDP was up, the country's primary goal, at least as it was expressed in this founding story, is to bless everyone they come in contact with. I will bless you so that you will be a blessing to others. Now, to be sure, there are other nations, there are other 8 nations around there that didn't see eye to eye with these ideals and would often start wars. So while you had an allegiance to your family, your clan, your tribe, you also had an allegiance to your nation. If the Philistines attack, each tribe would send soldiers and supplies and weapons to the battlefield to contribute. You were a family. You were a tribe. But the nation itself functioned as one big family. Especially and particularly when someone was out to attack you. Maybe we understand this one a little bit better this weekend too, don't we? Then Jesus comes along. And as he often wants to do, Jesus pushes the concept of family even further than the Old Testament understood it. Anyone who is on board with the will of the Father, anyone who can claim Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior, anyone who is doing their best to live into kingdom values, any of those, they are brothers and sisters in Christ. All of them. A little while back, I spent a couple trips in Vietnam, and it should be abundantly clear that I share nothing in common with some of the folks that I met over there. We have wildly different worldviews and understandings of the world. We have incredible gaps in our income. I think I saw one beard the whole time I was over there, and they somehow found a coffee that is too strong for me. And yet, it was, ooh. And yet, nothing in common. I was welcomed into their homes. I was showered with love and affection. We keep up together on Facebook to celebrate together, to mourn together, to lament together. Their pain has become my own, and mine has become theirs in a way that you could only call family, right? Forgive me a moment of editorializing, but I think one of the greatest tragedies and failures of the last few decades is how the American church has lost sight of the sense of family that Jesus has given us. We all too often would rather divide ourselves and highlight the division. We all too often mark what we're for by naming what we're against. We celebrate the ways that we are separated from our brothers and sisters at the expense of ever getting back together. We need to work on our family. So this is how it lived itself out in the Bible. Nuclear family, extended family, tribe, nation, everyone. And to be sure, the family as we know it in 2021 is vastly different than it was for our biblical brothers and sisters, in ways both bad and good. But if we're going to name family as one of our core values around here, how are we going to live into that? How can we as a church claim family as our first value? A couple of things that we can do to support families around here. The first thing is this, to ask the question, how busy can we possibly get? Some of you in here have school-age children. If I say the word calendar right now, I'm sure that you will likely break out into a cold sweat, won't you? Soccer practice, band practice, cheer practice, chess club practice, and that's all just the practices, let alone the games and performances that everybody's practicing for. Whew. I actually know a friend that hired a local college student, paid them an incredibly decent wage just to be the family's on-call Uber driver to get kids from point A to point B to point A. Parents are having a hard time keeping drop-off and pick-up schedules straight, and that is both a warning and a confession. Think that one through. Every single year I think, surely this is it. This is peak busyness. We can't possibly get any busier, and every single year, except for 2020, I've been wrong. And for what it's worth, after a year of slowing down, taking time off, relaxing a bit, perhaps even reprioritizing, we seem to have jumped right back to where we were before the pandemic started, didn't we? We're as busy as ever. Everyone wants to try and blame some group of people for all this busyness. Some churches and youth ministries, I know, end up blaming parents for signing their kids up for so much stuff. Some of them have blamed kids for signing up for so much stuff. Some have blamed coaches and teachers and directors and all of that, thinking back to their own childhoods at how busy they weren't and saying, how could you possibly have a soccer game on Sunday morning? These coaches. But here's what I want to say. to any family that's here and feeling the pressure of the modern American busy addiction, I'm not really interested in placing blame. I'm not. In fact, I think having a pair of twins of my own, I think I'm about to hop on this particular busyness roller coaster, and I'm not looking forward to it. Rather than placing blame, I'd rather just say as a church that we see you and we got your back 100%. Because you see, church should never just be one more thing to do. A whole bunch of families start to tense up a bit when they hear a preacher talk like this. I think because this is usually the beginning of a sales pitch for making church the most important priority in a person's life. If you have time for hockey, you have time for church. What do you mean they have a debate competition on Sunday? That's church day. Back in my day, and by the way, don't you just love anything that starts with back in my day? We didn't miss church unless we had a gushing wound on our leg, and even then, and again, as someone who is part of a young family with kids, I think the last thing we need is one more thing. The worship of Jesus Christ should never just be another thing to add to our calendars. The fellowship of like-minded disciples should never be something that you are guilted into participating in, ever. Church family relationship should never feel like a chore. And obviously, we love it that you're all here. So I wonder what church looks like for a busy family these days, or at least what it could look like. This past week I was riding with a friend along the Great Allegheny Passage Trail. 280 miles and one near miss with a Rottweiler later, I'm legitimately glad to be here with you all today. But the Great Allegheny Passage follows the Yaak River, and I got to watch rafters and kayakers, and, it's really hard for me to look at somebody doing something I think is crazy. But anyone who rafts or kayaks in those waters is a certifiable maniac. It's difficult, it's hard, it's constant. The river's always flowing. But I saw a few of these little formations in the water that I learned about in high school called an eddy. Does anybody know what an eddy is? When there's a big enough boulder in the river, the water that flows around the sides leaves a calm pool just behind the rock. And kayakers and rafters who are a little bit tired from the constant paddle or die nature of their sport, again, they're crazy, they'll slip into an eddy anytime they need a break, to relax, to catch their breath, to eat their lunch, whatever they need. My friends, church should be like an eddy in the middle of the rapids of our busy calendars. Look, whether you have kids of your own or not, we're all busier than any of us know what to do with, aren't we? Church should be the place that you come to find rest from this busy world. Church should be the place where you recharge before you go back out there. Church should be the place where you are encouraged and equipped and given refuge. And we are going to do everything in our power to make sure that Laboratory Presbyterian Church can be that place. On Sundays, for sure, but also with youth groups. For our busy teenagers, that should be an eddy for them. Also with this midweek glow service, that should be a time of rest and relaxation. And things like a harvest hootenanny, where we just gather around a fire, enjoy each other's company. Really, with every event and every program we do, it should be a time to come together, not to just add one more thing to a calendar, but to rest and to relax. We also need to navigate the waters of life as a church family, to live into that tribe mentality. I mentioned earlier that we didn't quite have a modern equivalent for tribe, but you know what? The more time I've spent here at Laboratory, I think church family is a pretty good fill-in for that category, don't you? Here at LPC, we actually might be a little more related to each other than most other churches, so that fits. But we're a people who have each other's back. We have a definite personality about us, don't we? We have decisions to make about the common good of our people. I don't think it's too far a thing to call our family a tribe. So what will our tribe be about? Be a family of prayer. A family of prayer for each other. Be a family of support and encouragement, where we lift each other up, where we offer an encouraging word. Be here for each other. We'll lift up these joys and concerns here on Sunday morning, yes, but also carry those with us through the week. We'll be the kind of family that looks after each other, that takes care of the needs of any and all. And, not to scare Presbyterians, we'll be the kind of family that looks out for the family that's not here yet. Those who are out there unsupported, with no church family to call their own. In fact, I'm betting there are people that you can imagine from your own life who need a place like this, aren't there? People who need a family that loves and encourages them. People who need a family that will support them. People who need a family that will douse them in prayers no matter what they're going through. People who need just an eddy from the constant busyness of life. And I know, evangelism scares the heck out of Presbyterians, doesn't it? We'll talk about that more in a value to come. Nothing is more frightening for some folks than to invite their friends to church, and that's fine. My encouragement today is to invite them instead to be a part of the family. Invite them to be a part of the family. I promise they already belong here.